When you start being unreasonable, you'll realize that everyone around you starts being reasonable. This is the simple philosophy of game theory. The sudden China-US negotiations and the results that exceeded expectations vividly showcase the entire process of the hidden power struggle between major countries. Its excitement far surpasses the tariff disputes themselves, allowing us to see just how rational and ruthless a country can be when making decisions. What exactly is game theory? Let's use a foreign reality show to explain. In the show, two contestants are faced with two buttons. One button means taking all the prize money, and the other means splitting the prize money. The rules of the game are particularly thrilling. If both contestants press the take all button, the prize money is forfeited. If one presses take all and the other presses split, the one who presses take all gets all the prize money. If both press split, they each get half of the prize money. In other words, when they don't know each other's choices, the two contestants face a dilemma. If you were in their shoes, what would you choose? This choice is called the prisoner's dilemma. Previously, the contestants were busy calculating against each other. Some tried to deceive the other into pressing split so they could take all the money, while others attempted to persuade the other to truly cooperate and split the money. Then, a contestant who played by his own rules showed up. He immediately revealed his hand, saying he had already pressed the take all button. He said that if the other contestant pressed split, he would privately share half of the prize money. But if the other also pressed take all, neither of them would get any money. After saying this, he went silent, neither saying more nor listening to what the opponent had to offer. The opponent was left stunned, having never seen such a way of playing. This contestant might seem unreasonable, but there's wisdom behind his actions. By making a strong statement in advance, he cornered his opponent into a situation where the only choices were to accept splitting the money or face a lose-lose outcome. In doing so, he shifted the dilemma onto the opponent. Based on rational thinking and self-interest, the opponent was forced to choose to split the money. That is to say, the madman voluntarily gave up the opportunity to take all the money but secured a guaranteed return. Although he didn't maximize his benefits, he perfectly avoided the worst-case scenario. This case vividly demonstrates the core of game theory. In the decision-making process of mutual influence, actively giving up the optimal choice can instead lead to more stable outcomes. When the US initiated the tariff war a month ago, China, unlike other countries, immediately countered strongly and kept sending a clear message. It was like China pressing the take all button high-profilely. Whether the US wants a lose-lose situation or to sit down and discuss the distribution of interests, it's all up to the US itself. It should be noted that the US didn't suddenly back down. It had been probing China for a month to see if China was just bluffing or truly willing to go all out. Trump tried to temporarily suspend tariffs on other countries except China, punished countries that didn't comply, signed agreements with the UK to show the benefits of being a good boy, and even warned China that if it didn't submit, greater punishment awaited. However, China was like that crazy contestant, remaining unmoved. It was a clear take-all stance. Unless the tariffs were completely removed, there was no room for negotiation. It didn't matter whether China would win the prize money or how China's domestic situation would be if it didn't. As a result, the situation reversed instantly, and it was Trump who became the impatient one. As we mentioned, with the rapid increase in tariff uncertainties, the inflation pressure in the US and the fiscal pressure caused by the decline in US Treasury bonds are now rebounding on the US itself. Coupled with the Federal Reserve's refusal to cut interest rates, Trump is in a difficult position. In this game of chicken, Trump blinked first. He never expected that his unreasonable actions would encounter someone who was willing to go to extremes. Facing China's unwavering and tough countermeasures, Trump's administration, amidst internal doubts and mutual blame, squandered its negotiation advantages and decided to make concessions and significantly soften its stance. The US, which always wants to be the one who benefits from the good times, lacks the motivation and courage to take extreme risks. This is the charm of game theory. The prisoner's dilemma model in the game at the beginning was proposed by the American mathematician John Nash. The US has long revealed to us the ultimate destination of the game. This is called the Nash equilibrium. In simple terms, the Nash equilibrium assumes that every player wants to maximize their own interests, but is also influenced by the strategies of other players. As a result, the outcome will eventually reach a balance. Everyone knows that before making a decision, they need to consider what choices others will make and then decide their own strategies based on others' moves. When everyone thinks this way, the final outcome will be a cold zero-sum game, with no winners, just a lot of effort for nothing. Many renowned business schools around the world also play similar games in class to help students quickly understand the esoteric concept of the Nash equilibrium. The professor said, "Let's play a game. The entry fee is $10 per person." Then, everyone secretly writes down a number between 1 and 100. The person whose number is closest to half of the average of all the numbers will be the winner and will receive the amount equal to half of the average as the prize money. It may seem like a game purely based on luck, but in fact, it's a perfect demonstration of the Nash equilibrium. First, the novice thinking, which is the first level of thinking, involves reasoning from the result of maximizing benefits. If everyone chooses 100, the average is 100, and half of it is 50. To maximize their own benefits, theoretically, one should choose 50. But if you think one step further and anticipate others' predictions, considering that all classmates are extremely smart and wouldn't miss this, most people are more likely to choose 50. In this case, 25 becomes the number with the highest chance of winning. But when everyone realizes that 25 is the better solution, you should then choose the number 12, which is an even deeper level of thinking, but it's already close to the break-even point. However, the most interesting part is yet to come. Half of 12 is 6. At this time, choosing the number 6 and winning means losing the $4 entry fee. So, the final optimal solution is the number 10. If everyone in the class is a rational person, no one should lose the entry fee, and no one will make a profit either. Eventually, everyone will magically and tacitly choose the number 10, forming a stable state where no one loses and no one gains, which is the zero-sum game dilemma under the Nash equilibrium. The stock market is a classic battlefield of zero-sum games. John Maynard Keynes, the founder of macroeconomics, once made a brilliant analogy. Professional investment can be compared to a beauty pageant. Contestants need to select 6 of the most beautiful faces from 100 photos. It should be noted that the winners are not those who pick the faces they think are the most beautiful, but those who choose the 6 faces closest to the average choice of everyone. The first level of thinking in this situation is to directly pick the faces one thinks are the most beautiful, which is equivalent to selecting stocks based solely on their fundamental analysis. The second level of thinking is to figure out which faces others might choose, corresponding to stock selection based on paying attention to the mainstream preferences of the market. Then, the third level of thinking is to guess how others will guess the public's choices. This is like anticipating the rotation of market hotspots. There are even those who can think at the 4th, 5th, or even higher levels of thinking. Stock market investment is not just about judging the intrinsic value but also about speculating on the judgments of others, and further, speculating on how others will speculate on the judgments of others. Keynes used this example to reveal a harsh truth. In the stock market, those who truly make money are often not the ones who understand corporate value the best, but those who are most skilled at reading collective psychological expectations. Take the recent boom in China's chip sector as an example. Do you think people are optimistic about chip technology? In fact, most people are gambling that others think this sector will rise. The superposition of such psychological expectations creates the so-called castle in the air effect. This kind of game makes the stock market prone to becoming a game of passing the parcel. When you get caught up in an infinite loop of speculation, the risks escalate exponentially. The biggest premise of game theory is the assumption that everyone is unaware of others' choices. China's approach to turning the tables against the odds is extremely ingenious, breaking the deadlock from this very assumption. From the moment the US ramped up tariffs, China and the US were trapped in a zero-sum game. If China didn't retaliate, the US would take all the benefits. If China retaliated simply, both sides would fall into a situation of mutual attacks, with neither side willing to back down, resulting in a lose-lose outcome. The only chance for a turnaround was for China to firmly declare its stance, as if saying, "I choose all-out response," and then exit the negotiation metaphorically. This forced the US into a single-choice situation. If the US also chose an all-out approach, it would be a lose-lose for both countries. However, if the US chose to reach a compromise, the two sides could negotiate privately, and both could take a portion of the benefits and return home satisfied. This is precisely why, until May 7th, when both sides suddenly announced that they would meet in Switzerland, there had been no news or premonition. In fact, the rich information and a solid negotiation team suggest that there had likely been prior contact between China and the US, and a significant amount of content and bottom lines had already been communicated. US Commerce Secretary Lutnick revealed in April that there was a flexible dialogue mechanism with intermediaries between China and the US. Switzerland and Singapore have been confirmed to have served as third-party communication channels since last year, responsible for conveying the core demands of both sides. Additionally, from the start of the negotiations on May 10th to the release of the joint statement on the 12th, it only took 48 hours. The essence of this lightning negotiation was a procedural confirmation of the results of the previous intensive consultations, also indirectly verifying that a basic consensus on a private compromise had been reached in the early stage. Therefore, we can see that on May 7th, China and the US suddenly announced that they would have major negotiations on the tariff issue in Geneva. According to the official content provided, China and the US will mutually reduce tariffs by 115% and establish a negotiation mechanism. This is actually a huge compromise made by Trump out of necessity. This also confirms my previous prediction of China's strategy towards Trump. Our contact with the US will not be carried out openly, and Trump will not be given any space to play with public opinion. After all, the internet celebrity president is most afraid of a lack of attention. If he's good at playing the internet card, then we're good at managing the internet. If he continues to talk nonsense, we can cut off his access to the negotiation stage. We will only start negotiations when the US privately and clearly offers concessions. However, considering Trump's capricious nature, we can't place too much hope on achieving a perfect new tariff policy within 90 days. Negotiating while fighting, and fighting while negotiating, is the most likely outcome. Understanding the logic of the current China-US game is far more important than the details of the tariff negotiations. Today's policies may change as soon as we wake up tomorrow. The only thing that won't change is the underlying logic. Trump is definitely not someone who gives up easily. Although he has messed up his business and image repeatedly in his life and faced repeated failures, it's undeniable that he's also the kind of person who keeps fighting despite setbacks. This time, he was forced back to the negotiation table, but we can't be blindly optimistic. The side that returns to the negotiation table always holds the upper hand in the game, especially considering that the US has the swords of being a major power and the dollar hegemony. Although the dollar and US Treasury bonds are a double-edged sword for Trump, it further indicates that Trump's resumption of negotiations is just a strategic delay. His aim is to bring the financial market and fiscal situation back on track and then find other ways to stir things up. Anyone with basic common sense understands that the 90-day tariff suspension is not a result of mutual trust between the two sides, but a strategic concession made by the US due to its domestic economic contradictions. Currently, we've only achieved a tactical victory, and there's still a long way to go for a strategic and permanent victory. As the saying goes, in war, there are no fixed strategies, just as water has no constant form. Therefore, even as negotiations proceed, China's negotiations with Brazil on soybeans, with Australia on minerals, and with Canada on oil and gas are all moving forward. These negotiations have not been stalled by the apparent easing of Sino-US relations. As Chairman Mao once said during the Chongqing negotiations, the better you fight, the safer I am at the negotiation table, and the easier it is to negotiate. At least this time, China has demonstrated admirable determination and wisdom, effectively diffusing the short-term conflict. In the next episode, we'll discuss a counterexample, looking at how Japan, facing similar dilemmas in the 1980s, signed the Unequal Plaza Accord with the US, causing its manufacturing industry to collapse and resulting in a complete loss. Dear friends, that's all for today's topic. Thank you for watching and for your likes and support.